I'm going to overtime here because and
Oh,
There's
and
no
that's
spot.
not
oh
that's
no.
not only because one,
Wow.
I love a competitive spirit and I love making
Yes.
Thomas make decisions,
Uh,
but also because is my true vote. If I was in Derek's position, when I think back on these two films, I love them very much. The way that I reflect on and recommend and think about is just something that is too potent for me to not at least push to a final vote here.
You're listening to All My Friends Are Movie Fans. I am Thomas Stoneham Judge, here to host conversation about what's new and relevant in film with my friends who are movie fans. While sports fans are building college basketball brackets, I'm here to steal that idea and post up for some March Madness with March movies. I have friends here to assist as we pass on some films, pivot on other films, and pick and roll through our own bracket of matchups until one March movie is the champion. You see, Todd. A part of the starting lineup, we have LA-based film critic at NerdBot and ForReel co-producer Derrick Murray.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to make Black Bag the best film of March. Really, really stoked. Can't wait. Yeah, can't wait.
That's funny. We also have Philadelphia-based editor-in-chief and podcast director over at The Rolling Tape, Danny Jarabek.
Hey, I'm still good meat. I'm perfectly good meat. I taste fine.
We
That was a really, really good Robert Pattinson impression. Really good. I sold. Well done,
Spot
Danny.
on.
Well done.
Well done. We have Vancouver-based creator, producer, and host of Contra Zoom Podcast, Dakota Arsenault.
Hello. I'm just here so I don't get fined and to beat Todd.
Yes, the rivalry begins. And we have, as Dakota mentioned, Vancouver-based ForReel film critic Todd Pengelly.
I'm not voting for any movies. I'm just voting against Dakota's movies.
Come at me, bro.
Yeah. So let's run it.
This is great. I love that this is a podcast where we can have rivalry, but the US-Canada relationships don't need a trade war. So thanks, guys.
Well, we'll see when we get into the bracket. We might be trading some stuff out here, man. I might impose tariffs on people that want to go after Black Bag. I might do it.
200% on anyone that's voting for Black Bag.
200%.
I will match.
I will match 200%. Okay, I'll match it, and we're just gonna escalate until we implode or whatever.
Yeah, the whole bracket blows up. Yeah.
That's funny. I want to take a moment to plug the whiskey that I've been plugging during this series of podcasts. This is the Lafayette bottle from Alpine Distilling, and it's really good. It's a cinnamony fruit flavored whiskey, and it's natural flavors. It's smooth and not syrupy like some other flavored whiskeys, and so highly recommend it. Highly recommend Alpine Distilling. This is Danny. I know it's 10 a.m. here, but it's a 1 p.m. where you are, so this counts, okay?
You took the words right out of my mouth, Danny. As soon as he started pouring, I was
All
like,
of us looked at our
yeah,
watches.
we were all like, oh,
It is just
okay.
10 a.m.
Okay. Yeah,
on
I
a
want
Saturday.
we need the record to show he's not allowed to edit this out. We need the record to show that no matter when he releases this, he fired up a glass of whiskey at 10 a.m.
This is PST based, everyone. This is not
Every time we
EST.
make a vote, we have to say, "Oh, by the way, this is 10 a.m. and Thomas is
10 a.m.
drinking."
No, look, I am in PST, but I identify as EST right now, so like this is okay.
Even 1 o'clock cracking open a bottle of whiskey.
It's
Like
Saturday.
you are on airport time, my friend. That is where you are.
That's possible,
Yep.
but I'm going to enjoy this glass of whiskey. I need to find a good one to go in coffee at some point, and maybe that might be a little more tolerable.
Yeah.
But this is what I have, and this is what it is. So, I am ready. See, you guys all have coffee. I have whiskey. This is just how I roll. Um, So it's interesting because we're going to be talking about March films so far in this decade, but as we are currently in March, I really wanted to talk with you guys and ask about movies that are coming out this month. Derek has already very prominently mentioned one of them. So why don't we start with you, Derek? What is or was your most anticipated film or the movie you were looking forward to most in March?
I yes, I'm going to champion Black Bag, and I was able to kind of enter it into the bracket. But honestly, and big this one too. But I am so looking forward to The Assessment, which comes out on March 21st. That movie, Danny and I saw it together at TIFF, and we were both just like, "Yep, that's our shit. Like that's made for us." Like, and it was honestly one
Point
of my
blank period.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite films of the festival, and I am so excited that more people finally get to see this because it's literally only been Danny that I've been able to talk to about it because no one else has actually seen it. So, yeah, that's easily my most anticipated of this year, of March.
The Assessment was one I had to rearrange my TIFF schedule to get to. And I made some very tough decisions to get to it. But I did, and you're right. I endorse everything you say. So, like, good pick there. Danny, what's the movie that's top of mind for you this March?
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely echoing the sentiment from Derek on The Assessment. I was so excited when this movie got picked up. It got a release date. Immediately was like, I have to cover this, you know. So very much excited to revisit that film. It's in my inbox right now, and I literally want to fire it up tonight. But I also want to shout out another film that I'm very excited for, and that's The Actor from Duke Johnson. As a big fan of Anomalisa, I'm very excited to see what Johnson's doing in a soul directive capacity. And this film, very much based on the trailer marketing material, looks like a movie that came from the mind of someone that was involved with Anomalisa. And so seeing Andre Holland get work, all of those things make me very excited for it. Although Neon seems to be shoving it under the rug a little bit, which makes me a little bit nervous. They didn't put it at any festivals. That's a little bit, can be cause for concern. But just going into it, I'm very much into this type of psychological, surreal type of storytelling. So The Actor is definitely something I'm looking forward to.
Nice, good pick there too. Todd, what's on your mind for movies in March?
I haven't seen a couple of the ones that are coming out this month, the big ones. I haven't gotten a chance to see Black Bag yet because it came out yesterday at time of recording. So like obviously Black Bag, right? Soderbergh, Fassbender, like that's just ridiculously my shit. The big one that everyone, if you'd asked them this question in February, would have said was Mickey 17. So I feel like we'll obviously talk about that later, but that's the obligatory going into March. That was the big one. Now it's like playing catch up with stuff that is just coming into theaters that I haven't seen yet, like Unbecoming a Guinea Fowl or Black Bag. But I don't know. I don't know what's coming out later this month, and I'm super looking forward to. So kind of that's my half answer.
Some good titles mentioned there. Dakota, what's on your mind?
I'll also second Derek's pick for The Assessment. I saw that at TIFF too. Absolutely bonkers. It's nice to see Alicia Vikander back. So it doesn't fully work for me, but like there's enough there that like it's an enjoyable ride. So definitely co-sign that. But in terms of what I'm looking forward to, this is another one where I think this month is kind of a little weaker. I think Black Bag and Seven Veils were the two best movies I think coming out this month, and they're already out now. But for me, Death of a Unicorn, and that looks like it's the type of movie that it's either going to do really well or it's really going to miss. And I'm not too sure where it's going to end up. It's a little disconcerting that they changed composers. Originally, John Carpenter was the composer, and just like a month or two ago, they announced that he's no longer the composer and they've got new music for it. So that's a little sus for me. But yeah, I'm still looking forward to this. I don't know. It looks funny. It looks interesting. I like Paul Rudd.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some really, really good things coming out of South by Southwest.
Nice.
A lot of like it's basically a demented Jurassic Park, and sign me up. And I've heard that like there really is not a weak link in the cast, and whoever brought this cast together like knew exactly what they were doing.
Oh, they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, right. Like, and they just utilize everybody the way that they should. So that's a great pick. Like I'm really excited about that one too.
As a Jenna Ortega stan, I have to co-sign that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I sat through Finest Kind because Jenna Ortega was in it for 5.2 seconds.
Seriously.
So.
Oh man. That's the truth, isn't it? That's funny. No, all good picks. I'm glad that you guys picked all of those because now I can pick the one because I agree with everything you guys said. But the movie that is on my radar and has literally been on my radar for 2 years. Derek knows where I'm going with this. For 2 years.
It's why I didn't pick it, by the way.
Thank you very much because I am so happy to plug this film. Magazine Dreams is finally hitting theaters, and guys, it's been a long time coming. Look, this movie, when I go to film festivals, I don't have a lot of time. And so I watch movies and then I have to wait until they come out to watch them again. I absolutely made time to see Magazine Dreams twice at Sundance. Dakota, why are you laughing at me?
Hey,
no, I'm not touching that movie.
It was fine to watch it.
Yeah, right.
I'm not touching that movie with a 10-foot pole.
Oh man, it's so good. And there's lots of conversation you can have about artists and art, and however you want to approach that subject. But I think more importantly than the Jonathan Majors controversy is the Elijah Bynum story here, where he did Hot Summer Nights, which I thought was fine. And to go from Hot Summer Nights to Magazine Dreams and make Magazine Dreams the movie that it is a really great feat as a second feature. And so I'm happy that this movie finally gets to come to light, and hopefully people can approach it and understand the context, I guess, between what's in the movie and and separate that from what happened outside of the movie, and give the production its due credit, because it is a very, very well made movie and that I liked a lot. So
Thomas, I have a funny story about Magazine Dreams.
Yes.
I bought it for virtual access at that year's Sundance and was saving it for last because it was the movie I was most anticipating watching. And I got the day wrong because of time difference on which day virtual access ended. And then I signed in and it was gone.
Oh no.
Oh, that's brutal.
So completely blew my opportunity to see it pre-controversy.
And now you have to wait 2 years to watch it. Well,
yeah, yep.
Oh,
and now I have it. I've got a screener link for it, and I'm sort of debating how I want to approach this.
I just want another podcast episode about Magazine Dreams. That would
we can definitely have it, because I have to sit down and write my piece about it today or tomorrow, and I'm really struggling because there's a lot of cosign with you when it comes to what the film does well, but also its biggest detriment is also its biggest asset, which is all wrapped up into Jonathan Majors, and it's really hard to even talk about this film without talking about him and what he does, but also who he is. And that it's hard. It's really tough. And actually, Danny, I had almost that exact same experience with Train Dreams this year, because I saved Train Dreams to be like one of the last films that I watched at Sundance, and then they friggin' pulled it when I went to fire it up. I couldn't get it back. I reached out to the publicist. I was trying so hard to get another link to it, and they were just like, nope, it's done. You can't have it. So I get it.
Yeah, no, that's tough when you're trying to plan film festivals, and it's always nice to end on something that you're really looking forward to. Yeah. But I guess we can't do that anymore because there's too much opportunity for that to go away, and then you're kind of stuck not having seen it.
Y'all just had to see Dylan O'Brien have gay sex. How dare you? Y'all just had to see it. Couldn't just watch the movie like regular.
And let me just say, the movie around it is way more interesting.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Danny.
That's great. Well, we're on the subject of film festivals, and one of the things about March is, now that the Oscars are over, kind of the big thing that happens in the industry is South by Southwest. Has anybody been keeping up with South by Southwest movies or buzz or anything like that?
I have a little bit. So I know, obviously, Death of a Unicorn, that's been getting pretty good reviews. I've heard a lot of Holland Drive with Rosamund Pike and Matthew, what's his name? The guy from The Americans, Matthew Rhys, yes. So So I've heard really, really good things about that film. That's like I'm such a sucker for chamber pieces. So that is about a married couple who get a call from their daughter who's been in an accident. And then the whole film is just them in the car trying to get to their daughter who's in this emergency situation. And so things just kind of like start to unfold there. Sign me up for Rosamund Pike, Matthew Rice, but I've heard really, really good things about that. I've heard Warfare is actually pretty strong, pretty solid, which I was pretty mid on Civil War, and Alex Garland did the whole like, I'm gonna take a break, and then like pulled a Liam Neeson and just did it again. Like, okay, cool, man. Whatever. But I've heard it's a pretty incredible experience, even if for nothing else, like sound design is just out of this world for Warfare. And then I've heard the surprising buddy comedy of the year is The Accountant 2, which colored me shocked, but apparently that's apparently that's what it is. But I've heard some pretty good things across the board for some of those big ones that dropped at South by Southwest.
I want to maybe touch on, you might have had a note about this in the show notes, Thomas, but like the idea of March as a movie release month. And
let's talk about that. I was kind of on the fence about talking about that because one of the things that I think January comes off as like a dump month. February can sometimes too. Yeah, Danny, what are your thoughts on March as like the quality of film that comes out in March?
Yeah, I think this is super interesting, and I think it's changed since COVID, especially because COVID sort of totally broke the mold in terms of Oscars and the traditional Oscars release window being that late fall, early December, September through December, sort of release window being the market for Oscars movies. And a couple of basically 2 years in a row, the Best Picture winner being in that March time zone with Everything Everywhere All at Once and Coda Everything Everywhere All at Once being at South by Southwest, putting a spotlight on that festival, garnering the Best Picture winner. So I think there was a really interesting moment in time where that sort of prestige window was sort of broken. And we were looking at other months to deliver some of these oddball films that became much more in the spotlight when independent films had a little bit of a stronger hold on the overall market and landscape. It is interesting to see that this past year we basically returned to the prestige window in late fall, early winter. But then at the same time, you have a month that's, this year, March 2025, overall, maybe a little weak, but you have this March 14th release date where basically everyone decided to release their mid-budget movie all at the same time. And I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing for movie watching culture to have something like this, like for no good reason that there's this insane cross-programming of an animated Looney Tunes movie, a mid-budget action blockbuster with Novocaine, a spy thriller with Black Bag, an oddball indie film with Opus. Like, there's a movie for everyone this weekend, and I think that's a really cool thing to celebrate.
It's a really good observation. Yeah, Dakota, I was gonna say, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I sort of want to echo a lot of what Danny was saying there. And I think it's sort of interesting looking at the way the movie calendar has sort of been shifting as well, because, you're right. January, February is sort of the dumping grounds. We also get a lot of horror movies in that time frame too. And then, of course, it seems like the summer blockbuster season has been starting earlier and earlier every year. Like it's traditionally, what's the American holiday, the May holiday?
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day is usually
Yep.
the sort of the unofficial start of summer blockbuster season. And sort of looking at like the movies that came out in the last 5 years, I'm quite surprised at the amount of like mid-budget, almost big budget movies that like can't go up against the tentpole Marvel DC sort of stuff that is traditionally being released in the summer months. But like there's some pretty big films that came out in the March timeline. So it's just very interesting to sort of see it's like studios being like, this would have been a traditional summer movie, but we can't compete against the Marvels of the world. So let's do it a month or two before then and sort of see what that looks like. I'd be curious to look at what maybe April for the last 5 years also looked like, if it's sort of a similar trend of like March and April is that like mid-tier, mid-budget film That's not quite a dumping ground, not quite a summer blockbuster tentpole.
Yeah, completely agree. I like that middle ground of movies because we just really don't get mid-budget movies at the same capacity and production scale that we used to. And like some types of movies that are operating in that realm that can't compete with Barbenheimer, but they're not just like Blumhouse slop that's getting thrust at us in January.
Yeah.
You know,
Like, it almost feels
there's a really fertile ground there.
Yeah, it almost sort of feels like the three of us. Todd is far too young to remember this because he's just a child. Sort of the type of movies that, like, when we were growing up, you would see in the traditional summer before this sort of superhero stuff took over and, you know, grabbed hold of cinemas. This was the sort of like the adult exciting movies to go to that were fun to see, the PG-13s, the Rs that you really want to see in July and August. Now it's, I guess, March.
Yeah, and not to belabor my enthusiasm for it, but Black Bag 10 years ago would be a summer blockbuster for adults. Like
100%.
It's the kind of like top spy thriller that you get every year for your dad, for your mom, for them to go to the theater and actually enjoy themselves and take a break. Like, this movie would have been a box office smash like 10, 15 years ago, like before the MCU kind of reshaped everything. And so it's interesting because you're right, to your point, like these are movies that would have been great, but the landscape has shifted so much that now they're just kind of in this almost limbo. But one thing I really like to kind of combine both of your points is, yes, there's a lot of mid-tier stuff, but to Danny's point, there's something for everybody. March and April now kind of feel like this month of discovery, where you kind of get a break from like, okay, yeah, here's all the Blumhouse schlock from January to February. And then, you know, the summer is going to start in May, June. So you're going to get all your blockbusters. But here's the time to kind of discover cinema. Here's the time to watch things like Black Bag, The Assessment, Death of a Unicorn, Magazine Dreams, like all these kind of smaller indie films. Some have larger budgets, some have smaller budgets, but like this is your opportunity to kind of discover those movies. And I think a lot of those discoveries we've seen are starting to carry on in longevity throughout the year, so that even when we get into your Cannes and your TIFF and your Telluride and your NIF and then your fall festival releases, we're still talking about some of these movies that came out around that March and April time. So and I think COVID had a lot to do with that. I think it just shifted the mindset of how people experience cinema, why people go to the movies, what gets butts and seats, whether or not the box office is really as valuable as they say. And I think a lot of those things we're still contending with. So even as we kind of try to shift back a little bit to the pre-COVID time, I don't know that we can. I don't know that that's really going to be something that we're going to be able to do. So yeah, these months are really interesting for sure.
Yeah, Todd, what are your thoughts here?
I think March and April are interesting times. I think for me personally, and Dakota I know is the same way. I'm sure in their respective ways that Danny and Derrick are as well. I'm a real like completionist when it comes to making sure I see as many of the Oscar movies as possible, or all of the awards movies, right? I'm an independent Spirit Awards voter, so I watch all of those. So that takes up a lot of my January and February. So March and April, I think, are not just about discovering the stuff that comes out in March and April, but there's also a lot of like sifting through anything from January and February I might have missed.
That's a really good point.
Most of that's garbage. Like most of that is like really, really not worth watching. It's like Godzilla movies, which I really enjoy. And it's like, what's the Jason Statham, The Beekeeper? That should have actually been my answer for the March movie I'm looking forward to. They're making just The Beekeeper 2 and naming it Working Man.
Yeah.
But then they're also still going to make...
They're also making a Beekeeper 2.
I'm just there. Like... They were like from the producers of The Beekeeper. I've never seen from the producers of and thought, oh, that matters to me. They were like from the producers of The Beekeeper. I was like, I'm there. I was like, don't even play the trailer. I don't care.
Yeah,
I'll be there.
I'm signed up.
There's a lot of like,
I'm signed up to. Ticket bought. I'm ready.
Like,
Let's go.
It's a lot of schlock in the early parts of the year, and then you hit these gems. And I was looking at some April releases because Dakota mentioned it, right? And I think that for me personally, the last couple of years since COVID, it's been a lot of like, when we get to the end of the year, calendar year, I'm like, damn, you remember what we had when we had everything everywhere all at once? Or remember when we had Challengers? Like, that was an April release, right? And there's this like, not nostalgia because it was like 8 months ago, but this sense of we're so heavily bogged down in like the fanfare of Oscar season ramping up or the end of year lists, and there's all of the heavy dramas. And then I think back on March and I'm like, wow, I watched The Beekeeper, and then the next day I watched like a five-star movie. And both of them were new releases that just like had gotten crammed into March, even though one was released in like January, because I didn't get to them in January. I had other stuff to prioritize. So it definitely March and April, the springtime is really like a time of discovery for sure. I can't remember who said it. One of the names that starts with a D a couple minutes ago said that it's a time of discovery, but they nailed it. So shout out whoever said that, unless it was Dakota.
I want to give credit. I think Derek said that, but I completely second exactly what you're saying, because I said this to another friend of mine that was basically like, when I went to work on March 3rd, I was like, this is like my New Year's Day. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so on the film calendar that
Yeah.
my head operates as like the beginning of March to beginning of March is my year. And so like on March 3rd, or like, the day after the Oscars, I can like start fresh. It's like a clean slate where I'm like, okay, now I can wrap my head around what is this year offering. And
Yep.
there's this weird time where you're like catching up on Oscars movies. You're all in the headspace of like our site is very awards based. And so like we have all that happening, and I'm also like trying to keep up with what's happening in the new year, and it's like this weird like two sides of my brain fighting at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with all of you guys. I think this is a good conversation to have, because I think it brings to the surface things that we like understand subconsciously, but I haven't actually like articulated before. Because yeah, March is like, I don't even do most anticipated of 2025 until March.
Until
Like,
Yeah.
Right.
like
Yeah.
Yeah,
get
same.
past awards, because that's what I'm thinking about. Nothing coming out in January, February is most anticipated. Okay, so like let's be real about that. And then March is when, like you guys are talking about, that time of discovery. We start hearing more about what's happening at Cannes, or what might be happening at Cannes. We get a better
Yeah.
look at what's happening in the
Yep.
summer.
Yep.
So yeah, March. That's a really interesting point. You have the regular New Year, but this is like the film industry New Year is March, and so
Because the year doesn't really conclude until the official award season is over.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
Right.
ends up,
Which
and then,
technically was last night because of
right,
Ace.
yeah. But yeah, no. And so March kind of like, even if you do Sundance, like a lot of those movies, they're not coming out until later in the year when you're looking forward to them anyway. So it's like, we mentioned Train Dreams, like shit. Magazine Dreams is a great example of a movie that like you've had to wait 2 years for other people to actually watch this film. So even if you do something like January, you're still recovering from everything you tried to cram in for December, January, February, anything that you miss. There's always some surprise that lands on a nomination list, and you got to run back and catch up on that. And so everything just like, I same Danny, like March 3rd, 4th, I was like, okay, let's go to the movies. Like it was.
It also takes until about March or April for us to sort of see what the end of the year landscape is starting to look like. Because like you'll hear like, oh, PTA has a new movie. Maybe it comes out next year, and you don't really know. And then it takes until like March or April, and they're like, oh yeah, and PTA is aiming to have it premiere at New York Film Festival or at TIFF or whatever. And you're like, okay, so we actually have a solid idea. This movie is actually complete. It should probably be out by award season, things like that. Whereas in January, when you look at these lists where there was like, 100, 200 movies are like, oh, what might come out this year? Most of those movies don't end up coming out within that calendar year. And they're just like ideas. Like, I don't know, I feel like every year they're like, Terrence Malick might have a new movie this year. We've been saying it for the last 15 years, but maybe this year he puts a movie out.
Way of the Wind might come out this year.
Some of these
started
movies
filming it.
don't even exist anymore. Like there were a couple years in a row where it's like, is Tarantino going to release his film critic movie? And now he's like, I'm not even doing that anymore. He's like, movies aren't for me. And you're like, okay.
Dakota, that's a really good point too, because right around now too is when we get like half confirmation about what's going to Cannes or not.
Yes.
And when a movie is confirmed not to, then you can start suspecting, is it a fall movie or is it not ready? Like, is this film not happening? Like, and a lot of those prestige movies that are either in or out on Cannes starts to give you a better sense for the year.
Yep.
Yeah. This is all great conversation, and it'll be interesting to see what happens as we get closer to Cannes and as we continue discovering film in March and into April before the blockbuster season. But let's jump into the main event for this podcast episode. We have a bracket to figure out. For those listening and watching, I have not shown the panel this bracket yet. So this will be a surprise once I'll get through the rules, and then I'll show you guys the bracket, and I'll explain it for those who are listening. So we're doing a March Madness bracket here, and the rules are as follows. This is a cooperative bracket effort. Today's panel will be voting round by round to determine the best March released film this decade. We're going to start with 32 picks, and most of these are just the highest rated films based on Letterboxd ratings. But there are also a handful that our guests got to pick just to keep the bracket interesting. I have seeded and strategically placed these on today's bracket. What I did for qualifications on the film, these are all movies that are feature-length movies, and they had either a wide release, a limited release, or a VOD release in March in North America between March 2020 and today. So this is why Derek keeps mentioning Black Bag, because it is currently...
I snuck it in there, baby. Let's go.
Today is March 15th, 2025. So yes, this weekend's releases do qualify for this bracket. In consideration for time constraints, matchup voting will go rather quickly at first, but as the bracket narrows and decisions become harder, I'll open up more opportunity for discussion. So I'm going to let you guys on the panel have most of the fun here with conversing and choosing picks. I'll just be here moderating, and I'll also serve as a tiebreaker.
I was going to say, is this why we have 5 people here?
This is why we have 5 people, but I do want you guys...
This is why he's drinking. He has to break the tie.
Yes, it is 10 a.m. and Thomas is drinking whiskey.
Yes,
Are you on your second glass yet?
Not yet, but keep this up. I might be.
I just can't wait until we start to get into like the semifinals, and he's like 3 glasses deep, and he's like, "Oh, whatever, give it to Black Bag. I don't care."
No, see, I might actually get into upset mode. I might do some really weird things.
That's a territory I like to operate in. Yeah,
Cinderella run.
Thomas has too much power already.
I do. So don't force my hand, guys.
He's drunk and drunk with power. This is dangerous.
All right, for the panel, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see what the bracket is. Where's the share screen?
It's just like a little green button right at the bottom.
Oh, that's it.
Put the whiskey down, Thomas.
No, I just needed.
See, this is why you have someone young.
Yeah, he was seeing 4 green buttons.
Yeah. So you see how there's 2 buttons? Click the
it's
one.
It's one in the middle.
I've become that person that doesn't know how to use Zoom. All right, cool, guys. This is the bracket. For those listening, let me run down the bracket for you.
Okay, cool. Raya and the Last Dragon. Anyone?
Anyone? Yes, because that I think was that was one of the top 24. But so on the left side of the bracket, we have Dune Part 2 versus Raya and the Last Dragon. Obviously, Raya and the Last Dragon's going through, right? We have Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves versus Tetris. We have The Batman versus Riddle of Fire. We have On Becoming a Guinea Fowl versus Late Night with the Devil. We have First Cow versus 1001. We have Tori and Lakita versus X. We have Turning Red versus Pinball, the man who saved the game. And we have Everything Everywhere All at Once versus Black Bag.
You son of a bitch.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute.
How dare you?
Wow.
On the right side of the bracket, we have Mickey 17 versus Wicked Letters. We have Problemista versus Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World. We have Snack Shack versus Love Lies Bleeding. We have RRR versus Scream 6. We have Nobody versus Palm Trees and Power Lines. We have Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always versus Swallow. We have John Wick Chapter 4 versus After Yang. And we have Femme versus Fresh. Oof. Yes, guys, man. I had the same reaction. I did I pre-planned placement, so I seeded everything and pre-planned placement before the films were picked. And then that corner happened.
Derek,
So
do you want to start an alliance?
Yes, Dakota. Yes.
let's get a feel for how you guys feel about this bracket. Danny, what's your initial reactions to this starting bracket?
Yeah, initial reaction, I think there's actually way more competitive first round matchups than I was anticipating. There's some films here that I am huge proponents of that are maybe a little bit more under the radar up against some heavy hitters that I would love to spark some conversation on. And I'm very curious to see how some of these things play out because you'd think that it would be some easy answers in the first round, but there's some really competitive matchups here.
Mm-hmm. Derek, what's your initial reactions to the
Yeah, same. I think you're going to need to share that whiskey with the rest of the class because these dude, some of these matchups, yeah, to Danny's point, like I'm just staring at some of them and these are some rough first round picks, man.
Mm-hmm. Dakota, what do you think?
I gotta say, looking at the bracket, I'll reveal it when we get there, but there's actually only one matchup that I'm conflicted on. Everything else is a very easy choice for me. Some of that comes down to I haven't seen all of these movies, so my default is the one I've seen. And I think there's going to be two matchups where I'm going to completely abstain from because I haven't seen either of the films. But yeah, there's a one that we all sort of groaned at when we saw it, where that's going to be an interesting discussion to see what happens there. But yeah, like I said, there's only one matchup that actually has me struggling right now.
Right. Todd, what do you think?
Yeah, there's definitely this kind of like internal push and pull I have between like trying to keep the like sanctity of the bracket and like the legitimacy of like, well, are we really doing this on like an objective level? Like, are these the films that really best represent March of the 2020s versus personal taste, where I'm like, this is the easiest ever path for John Wick 4 to get to the finals. So like there's like the push and pull, but I'm kidding. After Yang is a masterpiece. But yeah, so that strikes me at first, but otherwise, yeah, I'm ready. Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. We're going into round one. Like I said, this is going to go by pretty quickly. I think I will take a moment on the one that we all are looking at, and we might have some conversation on that one.
Yeah.
But this will go really quick. When I say your name, say your vote, and we're going to start on the left side of the bracket. So, Dune Part 2 versus Raya and the Last Dragon. Derek, what's your vote?
I'm going to go Dune Part 2.
Dune Part 2. Todd?
Dune.
All right, Danny?
Riot. No, I'm just kidding. Dune.
And Dakota?
Well, Todd voted for Dune, so I gotta go with
Hell yeah.
Dune.
If I had kept my joke pick, he would have actually had to break a tie on it.
First round tiebreaker.
The joke there being that I pick Dune, so Dakota has to pick the movie I entered into the bracket.
Yeah. Oh, damn it. No, never mind. I can't. No, I abstain.
All right. Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves versus Tetris. Derek, what's your vote?
Dungeons and Dragons. Easy.
All right. Todd, what's your vote?
D&D. Easy.
Cool. Danny, what's your vote?
Ooh, I personally actually don't think this is easy. These are both like very solid movies in my book that I think slightly exceeded my expectations for them. I'm gonna to keep things interesting, and I do think it's a slightly better movie in my book. I'm gonna go with Tetris. I really enjoyed that film.
Tetris. All right, Dakota, what's your vote?
Yeah, I'm going D&D as well. John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein, they are a force to be reckoned with, and they are not getting the respect they deserve.
I actually side with Danny on that one, but my vote is not needed this time.
If I have to hear gaming rights one more time, I was gonna.
I think that movie made something not interesting extremely interesting.
Yeah,
not to harp on it too much, but it came out at a time where there were like 9 movies that were all doing this.
Yeah,
it was
the product.
The
product
movie.
Yeah,
it was the product movie, and so I'd already watched like 5 of them before. So by the time I got to Tetris, I was just like, Oh my
That's fair.
God.
I
Like-
do think Tetris was the best amongst them in my book.
It is
Ooh.
one of the better ones.
Blackberry all the way.
Yeah,
Okay.
Blackberry.
I forgot about
by far
Blackberry.
the way.
Blackberry's better. Yes.
BlackBerry is the only one of all of them that actually doesn't endorse its corporate overlords.
That's true. That's true.
That's actually valid. All right, the Batman versus Riddle of Fire. Derek, your vote.
The Batman.
All right, Todd, your vote.
The Batman.
The Batman. Danny, your vote.
I know I'm being like the antagonist here, and this is obviously the Batman, but Riddle of Fire is one of the movies that I caught up with this week for this episode, and I
Nice.
really, really enjoyed. I thought it was absolutely delightful, so I did want to plug that, but the Batman is the better movie.
All right, and Dakota.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Riddle of Fire, but the Batman, I love that movie.
Cool. All right, on becoming a guinea fowl versus Late Night with the Devil. Let's start with Dakota on this one.
Thank God.
Late Night with the Devil. Haven't seen Guinea Fowl yet, so I can't comment on it.
All right, Danny.
I am going Late Night with the Devil. This is one I put into the bracket. This was a big surprise for me. Really enjoyed that one, even though I did see Guinea Fowl with Derek. Sorry, Derek.
Todd.
So I'm gonna break one of my own rules here, and a rule that I think most of us are abiding by. I'm going Guinea Fowl. Haven't seen it. Completely out on the generative AI used in Late Night with the Devil.
Oh, interesting.
So
That's fair.
On principle, my principle of not having seen a movie versus it using AI, generative AI. I'm going.
I don't know. I mean, Dune Part 2 also did.
Well, it's okay. We haven't gotten to the D&D discussion.
Ooh, there you go.
That is true. Derek, what's yours?
This is actually one of those ones that's like super super competitive for me because both of these films I enjoy a lot. Like I know I'm much higher on Guinea Fowl than Danny was. But I also like Late Night with the Devil was such a shocking surprise to me. I remember going in and just thinking like, yeah, cool, this will be average, and walking away being like, wow, that was great. I am, just because I want to get color on it and I want more eyes to kind of gravitate towards it, and I think it deserves it even if it doesn't win. I'm gonna go with Guinea Fowl. I think there's just a profoundness in that movie, and Todd, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you do.
I'm really looking forward to it.
It's pretty incredible. So I'm gonna go Guinea Fowl.
Do I have to break it?
I think that's a totally fair.
You do, yeah, tiebreaker.
I have not seen Guinea Fowl, which doesn't mean I wouldn't vote for it, but you guys all make really good arguments. I did, however, interview David Dastmalchian. So
I knew he was going to use that. I knew it. I knew it.
Look, you know what?
Dropper.
I like to. I can't like offer too much. I don't have that much power, but like every now and then I have a little bit of power where it's like, thank you, publicists, for getting me that interview. And in this case, it's rewarded with moving Late Night forward. So there we go. All right. For the next round, First Cow versus 1001. Dakota.
Oh, First Cow, easy. Love Kelly Reichardt. Huge Reichardt fan.
Nice, Danny.
So First Cow is my big blind spot on this bracket. But regardless, I am gonna do 1001 because one, I love that movie, and two, it's the movie that I actually met Derek through because that was the first time that we ever had a conversation, was when he came on our show and we reviewed that film, and I really look fondly back on that.
That's awesome. Todd, what's your vote?
Hate to agree with Dakota here. And Dakota actually has my list because I submitted it for his podcast. First Cow was like one of, I think, the 5 best movies of this decade. It's by far my favorite movie of 2020. So I'm going First Cow.
All right, Derek.
I hate to make you do this, Thomas, but I have to hold strong to 1001. That movie blew me away, and it was the first time Danny and I got together. He had put it out because and apparently no one else had seen it, and I was like, dude, I need to talk about this movie. And that's literally how Danny and I became friends. So I have to I gotta sign on. So it's 1001 for me.
And Thomas, all of our friends are movie fans. Like, you can't go against friendship here. Like,
guys, I actually was not expecting the tiebreaker to be this difficult. I actually thought that it would be easy to go one way or the other, because First Cow is a blind spot for me, and I did really enjoy 1001. But I'm gonna go with First Cow because of how avidly you guys are talking about it. I'm gonna get around to seeing it.
Thomas hates
it's so
friendship.
good.
It's
Right?
filmed in northern
Oh
Washington.
no!
It was filmed in your backyard.
Yes,
Thomas.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's a local film. So that I also had that in mind as well.
You know what, guys? We're gonna pause the bracket. We're gonna make Thomas go and listen to our episode, Danny and I
Yeah.
talking about 1001.
no, am I gonna
Then we can
regret
come
this?
back. He can change his vote, and we can move on. So,
No, then we need to pause it, and so that way you can watch First Cow and see its greatness.
Right. I was going to say, if we're talking about movie Friends, First Cow is the best example of friendship in a movie.
Oh my
This
goodness,
decade.
And you're gonna want to eat some oily cakes.
Yeah.
that was
Just
tough,
dropping the
guys.
Spotify link in the chat, just in case anyone feels like that.
I love
Little
you so
subtle
much, Danny.
self-promotion.
I love you so much.
All right. Well, that was tough. The next round, Tori and Lakita versus X. Dakota, what's your vote here?
X was my wild card. It is prepare for the hot take. Easily the best film in that trilogy. Pearl is not good. X, huge fan. Huge fan.
So, X, all right.
Yeah. I respect your wrong opinion, but yes.
Danny, what's your vote?
I unfortunately have not seen Tori and Lokita. I don't love X. I think Pearl is by far the best movie of the trilogy. And so I'm going to use my vote for X to promote Pearl.
Oh, okay.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
All right. Todd, what's your vote?
So, again, everything Dakota said is correct. I was at the world premiere of Pearl. That movie is garbage. X is much better.
What is happening on this podcast right now?
Todd,
Tori
I
and
finally
Lakita
like you.
is fine. I like Tori and Lakita fine, but I'm going X.
Derek, what's your vote?
Who knew that Pearl would be the movie to unite enemies? Like, who knew that was going to be?
And not for liking it. For
I know.
It's a horrible movie.
It's a masterpiece. I don't know what you're talking about.
She overacts the shit out of that movie.
Don't you dare talk about my Boo Mia Goth. How
At least
dare
she
you.
has something to do, unlike the other two movies in the trilogy.
Yeah, I'm gonna go X, but a lot of that is because of how much I love Pearl, and I need to make sure that these guys get talking.
Derek and I just think the same.
I know.
Way, and I love it.
I know.
That's so great. All right. Turning Red versus Pinball, the man who saved the game. Dakota, what's your vote here?
Shout out to Toronto. Turning Red. That's where I'm from. Gotta get my vote.
Yep. Danny, what's your vote here?
Turning Red. I wish this movie got a better opportunity given its release time frame and was able to hit more theaters. I actually like this personal era of Pixar with some of these very more introspective movies about personal stories, and I appreciate Turning Red.
Nice. Derek, Derek, what's your vote?
Same. Yeah, I think Turning Red is a victim of COVID, and I think in a better time, like it probably would have been a much bigger movie. But I really love Turning Red. So
what?
Yeah.
Pinball wasn't a victim of COVID. I'm pretty sure. Which one came out first? Was it Pinball or Tetris? I remember they came out very closely, and I'm like, oh, look at these games.
I think Tetris came out first, but Turning Red is by far the better movie. So
yeah, Todd, what's your vote?
Turning Red.
Turning Red. Moving Turning Red along. Perfect. Okay.
Oh, I hate this so much.
This to the very end.
All right.
This is not a hard decision.
This is the bottom of the left part of the bracket. So this is Everything Everywhere All at Once versus Black Bag. Danny thinks this isn't a very difficult choice. So Danny,
He's right.
What is your vote?
Danny's right.
Everything Everywhere All at Once is better in every conceivable way.
So we have one for Everything Everywhere. Dakota?
Very right. This is such an easy choice. Black Bag. Everything Everywhere is just fine.
Oh no!
It's fine.
Derek, I know your vote.
Oh, Dakota.
Come on, Alliance.
Dakota, honestly, Dakota, you are almost giving me the confidence to
Let's
make
do it.
a bold hot take choice and force Thomas to do a tiebreaker.
Yes.
I genuinely love both of these films. I think that Black Bag is going to be known as one of the best films of the year. I adore Everything Everywhere All at Once. It absolutely shattered me. But honestly, just for the sake of being I'm doing it. I'm riding my shtick to the end. Black Bag.
Black Bag.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Well, so it comes up to me to pitch the case to Thomas. Here's the thing. I haven't seen Black Bag. I'm so deeply in the bag though for Soderbergh that just because I'm going to. No, I'm kidding. I just really wanted to break Dakota's heart.
I hate you, Todd.
I'm obviously going everything everywhere all at once. And the reason is I'm like, if Black Bag is my favorite movie of this year, that won't change the fact that Everything Everywhere is one of like the 3 movies I think that culturally have defined the 2020s so far. And like for that fact alone, I think it dropping in round 1 would be like, what are we doing here? Like, regardless of how we feel about it, it's like that movie was everywhere and is still everywhere. And we've all spent this week reviewing a Netflix movie that I'm pretty sure we all probably agree is abysmal in Electric State, and that is Kiyu Kwan in it, which was another revival from Everything Everywhere. Like its cultural impact is everywhere still. So yeah, I'm going Everything Everywhere.
And also redefined what a March release can do.
Yeah, that's valid.
And to your point too, Danny, like this really is putting South by Southwest on the map as a movie. So even though like, yes, my vote is going to be for Black Bag, I'm not going to be crushed that Everything Everywhere All at Once beats it. And when we do this again next March, like I'm going to insert Black Bag again, and it's probably going to go farther. So it's all good. It's all good.
Hopefully it's on a different part of the bracket. Let's put Black Bag up against Pinball next time.
Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, watch him put it up against Nora next year or some shit. Okay.
All right, so we're moving over to the right side of the bracket. We have at the top there Mickey 17 versus Wicked Little Letters. Danny, what's your vote here?
If my intro wasn't a clue enough, I'm a big Mickey 17 stan. Definitely Mickey 17.
All right, Dakota, what's your vote?
I haven't seen Wicked Little Letters. Mickey 17 I liked but didn't love, so Mickey gets my vote.
All right, Derek, your vote?
Well, I entered Wicked Little Letters, and I think it's just absolutely delightful and very funny. So I'm going to stick with that.
Awesome. Todd, your vote?
I'll go Mickey, but my grandmother really likes Wicked Little Letters. So obligatory shout out.
Obligatory shout out. That's cool. Mickey moves forward. All right. Problemista versus Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World. Danny, what's your vote here?
Problemista was my sneaky top 10 movie of 2024. I think what Julio Torres does here is so creative, and I really, really love that Problemista exists. So Problemista.
Nice. Dakota, your vote?
I am abstaining. I have not seen either.
Okay. Derek, your vote?
Listen, I stand with Bank of America. So I'm going to go Problemista.
All right. Todd, your vote?
I'll go. It won't matter. I'll go. Don't Expect Too Much from the End of the World because I really love what's going on there. But I really love Problemista too.
Nice. Right.
I need to rewatch Do Not Expect Too Much because I like everybody is just so over the moon about that film, and I walked away from it thinking it's just fine, but I feel like I need to rewatch it and see if there's something that I missed because it just did not resonate with me the way that it's like just dominated some of my favorite critics and some of my favorite colleagues. Like it's at the top of all of their lists, and I'm just like, what did I miss in this film? So yeah.
All right. We have Snack Shack versus Love Lies Bleeding. Todd, what's your vote here?
Love Lies Bleeding.
Interesting. All right. Danny, your vote?
This is actually one that I thought was really tough because these are both very solid 3.5s for me.
Yeah.
That I enjoyed, didn't necessarily love completely either, but I think both are really, really good. I'm a Kristen Stewart stan, so Love Lies Bleeding.
Nice. Derek, what's your vote?
Yeah, it's funny because both of these films, like Danny said, they're both like kind of 3.5s. I'd maybe give Love Lies Bleeding a little bit higher, but they're also both showcases for a singular performer. So like Snack Shack showcases Gabriel LaBelle like breaking out from the Fablemans, and then Love Lies Bleeding shows off Katie O'Brien. It's just like this incredible discovery. So they both have like this actor in them that is like driving the success of the movie. But I think Love Lies Bleeding is more successful. So I'm going to go with that one.
Cool. Dakota, do you disagree with them?
So this was, as I was alluding to, my hardest bracket as well.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. I thought that was going to be a bit of a hot take where I was like, who would think this was a hard one? But no, I'm glad I'm not alone here. Snackshot, I thought was it was so funny.
Yeah.
I was not expecting it, and like I get it. It's a dumb, stupid 80s style comedy, but we don't get those anymore. And I love that. And Love Lies Bleeding was so unique and original and bold and out there. Just so that we have it on the record, like literally this is like a 50-50 split for me. I'm gonna say Snack Shot just so that
Nice.
I can be on the record and say that I like it. But I'm very happy with Love Lies Bleeding. Moving on.
I like it. I like the diplomacy there.
That was like a perfectly competitive matchup.
Yeah, right?
Nice.
Yeah. I actually feel good. Like I would have felt good either way. Like wherever that one went, I would have been okay with.
That's awesome. All right. RRR versus Scream 6.
Do we need to vote on this? Like,
I know.
is there...
I don't need to vote, but like I'm waiting for someone to say something.
Just go ahead and move Scream 6 across, bro.
I'm gonna save us a little bit of time and just move RRR forward. Was there any abstains from that?
Well, I wasn't going to vote for RRR.
Oh, okay. So was it 3 yeses for RRR?
I put up Screen 6 as my pick, as my wild card. Absolutely love the Ortega and Barrera Scream films. Huge fan of that franchise. Outside of Not To, RRR is just fine.
Killing me. Let me tell you something. I don't have a vote in this one. But let me tell you, my husband does not like 3-hour movies in a different language, so he does not watch RRR. So when I'm home alone, let me tell you something. What I do, I get pizza, I get drunk, and I watch RRR
at 10 a.m. on a
10 a.m.
on occasion.
My local theater did a thing with this movie where once a month for about a year they hosted like rowdy screenings of this.
Oh my god!
And I went to a couple, and it just got bigger and bigger every single time. Just a cool experience.
I treat RRR like a sporting experience. I'm telling you, I cheer more in RRR than I do in any sport that I go to. So like, that movie is just a banger. Anyway, not that my opinion matters here, but all right. Next matchup: Nobody versus Palm Trees and Power Lines. Dakota, what's your vote here?
I am abstaining. Haven't seen either.
Cool. Derrick, what's your vote?
I've seen both. I enjoy both. And just for the sake of trying to move a very small film, but a very necessary watch, I'm going to go Palm Trees and Power Lines.
All right. Todd, what's your vote?
I'm going Nobody. I think Palm Trees and Power Lines is like an actively pretty bad movie.
Actively. All right, Danny, you're the tiebreaker here.
This is a pretty easy tiebreak for me, and I'm going to pull the Thomas card here. I interviewed the director of this movie and really enjoyed that conversation, and actually think this is a small film that's worth putting more eyes on. So Palm Trees and Power Lines.
Wow. I feel like that's an upset.
That it might be.
It is. It is. Yeah, for sure.
That's a group of critics promoting a really small indie movie.
No, it is.
Right. That's true.
Little tiny Sundance indie that only critics have seen.
We're like the 5 people who have seen that movie.
Right.
But also, like to your point too, Danny, like the lead actor retweeted my tweet when I had put it out in my like quick review. So naturally I have to stand for it and push it through. So
yes, because
shout out to Jamie Dack, the director of that movie.
Yeah, see, because my audience is full of like publicists and celebrities. If you guys, just give us the interviews, we will champion your film, okay?
We're moving them through the bracket, guys.
We're moving them. This is important stuff. See,
we're who you want to watch your movies.
See, Steven Soderbergh, you should have done those interviews. Blackjack would have won.
Yeah, Bob Odenkirk.
But like legitimately, that could have changed things. All right. Next matchup: Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always versus Swallow. Todd, what's your vote here?
Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
All right, Danny, what's your vote?
I put up Swallow, but there's no world in which I'm voting against Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, especially in a first round matchup. This, for me, is one of those 2020s movies that I think is just indelibly important.
Yeah.
Nice. Dakota, your vote.
Todd mentioned it earlier. I did do a poll of the best films of the decade so far, and Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always made my personal list as well.
Yep.
Phenomenal film.
Very nice. Derrick?
Yeah, I like both of these, but to all of your like, I'm not voting against Never Rarely in the first round. Like, that's insanity. So yeah.
I think about the titular scene of that movie like once a week.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
For sure. Next matchup, John Wick Chapter 4 versus After Yang. Dakota, what's your vote here?
Colin Farrell doing that dance alone is enough for After Yang to move forward. Come on.
Derek, what's your vote?
This is actually tougher than I thought, because I really love After Yang. I just think it's such a beautiful film. But I'm gonna go John Wick. I'm gonna go John Wick Chapter 4.
All right, Todd, what's your vote?
So I really like After Yang a lot, and for some reason this one just like settles in my heart quite easily. It's like John Wick 4. This movie's beautiful. This movie's really beautiful. They're both beautiful, but John Wick Chapter 4 is I just like, I don't know.
It's pretty incredible to find a no holds barred action film that has that much stunning cinematography. Like, it's wild to me that you can actually appreciate cinematography in something as bonkers as John Wick Chapter 4.
Huh. All right. Well, Danny, what's your vote?
This is sort of a perfect storm, because while I have a lot of respect for John Wick Chapter 4, Kogonada is probably one of very few filmmakers. Like, he's my Mount Rushmore of filmmakers, despite only having 2 films. I think he has delivered 2 perfect films. And After Yang is like me in film form. Everything I love about film is After Yang. It's a perfect 5-star movie in my book, and I just have to promote After Yang.
Guys, I quit being the tiebreaker. I quit. I thought this was going to be easy. I had one in mind that I'm like, yeah, that's obviously the one. But now I'm realizing that I might have action movie bias.
Oh no, Todd!
Let's go!
Todd Thomas, the two of you.
Guys, I don't.
So
no,
one of the moments in John Wick 4 that stands out to me when I think about it is there's a moment where Keanu's sitting in a church, and I can't remember who says it to him, but they go, "You're gonna die." And they're talking about his connection to his wife and how he'll finally be able to see her again. And they go, "You're gonna die." And he sits there and he just goes, "Maybe not." And it's like so beautiful that he's losing something he wants again, while also getting something he wants. And that is also beautiful. After Yang is a 5-star meditation on life, but it doesn't have a flame-throwing gun.
What about the T documentary impression that he does of Werner Herzog's voice? Come on.
I'm going to go with John Wick.
Oh,
I was not expecting that. I wasn't expecting that. Oh no, what have I done?
I'm going to flip this table that I'm not using.
Yo, look, I think just the fact that y'all moved the needle for me on John Wick, because when the bracket was built, I looked at that matchup and said After Yang, obviously. And then you guys started talking about John Wick Chapter 4, and I was like, oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Well,
I apologize.
Have you re-listened to the score of After Yang?
I know,
lately?
it's so good. It's
great
so
score.
Good. Oh,
no takebacks. On to the next.
Yeah, I'm sticking. John Wick Chapter 4. That was tough, guys.
What's funny is that's probably the biggest hurdle that John Wick Chapter 4 had to overcome.
Yeah, that's true.
This is so interesting. Okay, that last matchup for round 1, Fem versus Fresh. Todd, we're gonna start with you. What's your vote here?
I'm Fresh. I put Fresh on the board. I also think that Femme is like a really problematic movie.
Danny, what's your vote?
I am going to go with Fresh. I have not seen Femme, so Fresh.
All right. Dakota, your vote?
I'm too mad, so I'm not voting this time. And I haven't seen either.
All right. Derek, what's your vote?
I actually really like both of these. I am gonna I'm not going to put it through, but I do encourage more people to seek out Femme, because even though it does have some problematic elements, I do think it's done very, very well. And it's one of the better performances from George McKay, who I think just constantly is trying things. I didn't like what he does in the end, but he is still somebody who is like really trying to make an effort to do anything that he can to demonstrate himself as an actor and a performer. So I highly encourage you guys to do that, even though I am going to knock it out and I'm going to go with Fresh. I just, all of that can apply to Sebastian Stan too. So,
that's fair.
Yeah.
Talk about a sicko filmography.
Right? Jesus, man. Like you would have no idea if you just looked at it and be like, wait, this guy was in all of these movies? Like,
right. It's wild. Okay, so just a quick rundown for our listeners trying to keep up. Our round 2 matchups are Dune Part 2 versus Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, the Batman versus Late Night with the Devil, First Cow versus X, Turning Red versus Everything Everywhere All at Once on the left side, and then on the right side we have Mickey 17 versus Problemista, Love Lives Bleeding versus RRR, Palm Trees and Power Lines versus Never Really Sometimes Always, and then John Wick Chapter 4 versus Fresh. How are we feeling about this?
I think it's easier.
It weirdly got easier.
Yeah, that's as I was reading
I would agree.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I was reading it, I felt the same way.
Yeah, I think the next round will be significantly harder.
Oh, for sure.
But this feel like I can already kind of figure out which ones. There's like maybe 1 or 2 on here that I'm like, I don't know, maybe, but for the most part, this feels pretty simple.
Yeah, this is interesting. All right, let's get into it. Dune Part 2 versus Dungeons and Dragons. Dakota, what's your vote here?
While I was a big advocate for D&D, the first round, Dune Part 2, I gotta go with that.
Yeah, Derek, your vote.
I'm gonna same thing with Dakota. I think D&D. I'd love to see it move forward. I actually personally like that movie better. But if we're gonna kind of do that pull away that Todd was talking about, of like objectively the better made film, it is Dune Part 2. So,
Todd, what's your vote?
Well, only one of these movies has miniature Bradley Cooper, and so I'm going Dune Part 2. But yeah, the D&D movie is awesome.
Danny, what's your vote?
So this is how Tetris can still win the left side of the this feels like a cheat code. Like Dune Part 2, for all intents and purposes, should not be a March release. But
it really shouldn't. In fact, it wasn't. I mean, I think it was because it was delayed. Some industry stuff, I think. So yeah, you're right. It really shouldn't be here, but moving along, it is.
It was the strikes that pushed it from November to March, right?
That's right. Yes. Huh. Interesting. And perhaps to its detriment, as the Oscars may have indicated.
This is true, but not for the all my friends are movie friends bracket.
Nope.
Exactly,
right.
not for the bracket here.
We know the truth, guys. We know the truth.
We are dialed
Denis,
in.
we will get you that Oscar.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Next matchup: the Batman versus Late Night with the Devil. Todd, what's your vote here?
The Batman.
The Batman.
I'll save us time.
Yeah. Okay. Danny, what's your vote?
This could be Robert Pattinson versus Robert Pattinson, the Batman.
Oh, interesting. Dakota, what's your vote?
I gotta go with the Batman. It might very well be the best Batman movie, which its competition is The Dark Knight, so it's crazy to even think that.
Interesting. All right, Derek, what's your vote?
Unanimous. I'm gonna go with the Batman, and there were even parts of that film where I was kind of mid on, but it is objectively an incredibly well made film. So Batman for sure.
This is easier, isn't it? Huh? All right, next matchup: First Cow versus X. Derek, what's your vote here?
First Cow. I love me some Pearl, but I can't carry X all the way through to the end on Pearl. So
that's valid. Todd, what's your vote?
First Cow.
Danny?
Yeah, actually, again, this is my major blind spot in having seen First Cow, but my Pearl favor ended in the first round, so First Cow.
Okay. First Cow. And then Dakota.
Oh man, yeah, I put up X, but First Cow is so good. Yeah, gotta go with First Cow.
Moving First Cow forward. All right, Turning Red versus Everything Everywhere All at Once. Danny, what's your vote here?
Once again, I feel like this is pretty easy. Everything Everywhere All at Once.
All right. Dakota, your vote.
I'm gonna be a contrarian for the sake of it. Turning Red.
All right, you got to stay strong with the Toronto representation. Yeah.
Yep, I do.
Derek, what's your vote?
all right, so here's how Black Bag can still make it all the way through to the end. No, let's Everything Everywhere. Yeah,
that's fair. Todd, your vote.
Everything Everywhere, and like the 4 we now have on this left side, I think would have made like a perfect final 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any
That's a
win.
good point.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it really could.
Yeah, that's gonna
Except
be
for
tough.
Black Bag. That would have been even better.
Yeah, yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
On the right side of the board, Mickey 17 versus Problemista. Derek, what's your vote here?
I'm going Problemista.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Todd, your vote.
I'm also going Problemista.
Danny.
The thing is, I would not be mad to see Problemista go farther, but I have made it very much part of my personality to defend Mickey 17 to the ends of the earth because I really, really think that this is a better movie than a lot of people have said it is. So I'm gonna go Mickey 17, which feels wrong because I am also a huge proponent of Problemista, but
Dakota, you gonna make this problematic for me?
Mickey 17 is just fine, and because of that, I'm voting for Mickey 17.
So he is going to make it problematic for you.
Oh, great. I was just ready to move Problemista forward. And you know what?
Thomas, before you make your decision, make sure you put this into FileMaker Pro. And
I do take bribes. So here's the thing. Problemista is a blind spot for me. I have not seen Problemista. But Derek knows I was not the biggest fan of the third act of Mickey 17. I think there's so much that movie could have done and just didn't. I'm gonna go ahead and vote for Problemista.
If it helps you feel better, there's an amazing Tilda Swinton performance in Problemista.
Bro,
I believe it.
I've made like 2 Problemista jokes already, and only people that have seen it and love that movie will get them.
Look,
this movie is like, I think you will dig the hell out of Problemista.
Great.
I think so.
Also, I think be patient with it because it's okay. For me, it's a bit grating early on, but then oh my god, the ending just completely flips everything around.
It's so good.
Interesting.
Problemista is so good.
Okay. So I have a double feature that I have to do today after this first cow on Problemista. All right, next matchup: Love Lies Bleeding versus RRR. Todd, what's your vote here?
RRR.
All right, Danny.
Yeah, RRR.
You guys are making the right choice. Dakota.
Love Lies Bleeding.
Okay. Derek.
I could put it on you just for fun because I know what's going to happen.
I mean, this one is not.
Because I already know what's going to happen, but no, it's RRR. RRR
this one will not be hard. I do not get drunk to Love Lies Bleeding.
Okay. I did not expect to be the big contrarian of the group here. I'm gonna say that.
So to be fair, I like Love Lies Bleeding. I saw that one. I saw that one at Sundance, and it's an interesting one. But yeah, I make events out of RRR, so that's what's up. Palm Trees and Power Lines versus Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. Danny, what's your vote?
I actually weirdly think that these two movies would be great to watch in conjunction with one another.
Oh, that's a good point.
But Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, again, like this is a best of the decade type of movie for me.
Nice. Dakota.
Pretty easy. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
All right, Derek.
Yeah, Never, Rarely.
And Todd, for the record.
Unanimous.
Perfect. All right. Kind of know where this one's gonna go. John Wick Chapter 4 versus Fresh. Dakota, your vote.
Haven't seen either, so Fresh.
Oh.
How have you not seen either one of these movies?
There you go.
I watched the first 2 John Wicks, and they're fine. I'm not crazy into that style of movie.
Okay.
So we'll suffer through John Wick Chapter 3, and then watch John Wick Chapter 4, and
which is why I hear number 4 is a better quality, but 3 is a huge dip, and so that's been the hurdle that I haven't been able to overcome yet.
Yeah, 3 is by far the worst in the franchise.
Yeah,
I don't think 3 is like abysmal. Like
no,
it's the
no, not at all.
It's not a bad movie.
Yeah, it's you're talking about a franchise that like is pretty solid across the board, and you just have one that's like slightly less good than the rest of them. But yeah, it's not abysmal, and there's some really great. It's just when you compare it to the first 2 and 4, where you're like, oh shit, yeah, they can really do this. So yeah.
As someone who skipped 3, I really don't feel that you're missing much story-wise.
That's actually a good point.
Definitely not.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Just watch Chapter 4. I mean, as a conclusion to a series, like it does a really great job of doing that. Derek, for the record, what's your vote?
John Wick.
Yeah. Moving that forward.
But for the record, Fresh is incredible.
Fresh
like
is great.
Fresh is
yes.
so much fun. And if you haven't seen Fresh, like you really should, because it's the best you're gonna get out of Daisy Edgar Jones, like by far and away. And it's Sebastian Stan in his just wild era, which has proven dividends with an Oscar nom now. So like definitely watch Fresh. It's very, very good.
Yeah. All right, guys, that was kind of easy, yeah?
Yeah.
I feel like we
I mean, yeah, if the wrong picks are getting through, I guess it is easy.
I think it only gets harder from here. So let's go ahead and dive into this next round. For those listening, we have what is this? Our Elite Eight? Is that what this one's called?
Yeah.
Derek knows I don't do sports all that much, and so like I'm trying very desperately to keep up with the terminology. So here we go, Elite Eight. So we have Dune Part 2 versus The Batman. We have First Cow versus Everything Everywhere All at Once. We have Problemista versus RRR, and then we have Never Really Sometimes Always against John Wick Chapter 4. Diving in.
Such a wild lineup.
Yeah.
It really is.
That last matchup is like, how can I frame the two most different March movies?
You know what? I kind of want to start with that one. Let's do that because just the order. Let's start there. Never Really Sometimes Always versus John Wick Chapter 4. Derek, what's your vote here?
Man,
do it, Derek.
Danny's right. Like these movies could not be more different. I'm trying not to look ahead at the board and see like what this is going to go up because I think I know what it's going to go up against, and so it's like we're going to run into the same problem in the next round. So but I shouldn't do that. I should just make the vote the way it is now and not what it's going to be. But I can't do that.
Present, Derek.
I can't do it. I have anxiety and I have to look ahead and plan. So we're gonna go John Wick Chapter 4.
All right, Todd, your vote.
Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is probably the movie that is more timely today than when it was released.
Interesting, yeah.
And John Wick Chapter 4 is a masterpiece. But I'm going to go with Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
Wow.
1-1. This is tough. Oof. Danny, what's your vote here?
As someone who's not as much John Wick pilled as the general action movie fan, this one's actually pretty easy for me. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always was incredibly important when it came out. It's more important today. And once again, like I'll just reiterate, I think about that titular scene constantly. And I still find it hard to come back to, despite the fact that I love it so much because of how devastating its impact is.
Dakota, it's on you.
Yeah, I know Thomas is very anti-feminist and anti-woman, so I got to make sure that it doesn't come down to him.
Dakota, just because I am gay does not mean I don't like women, okay?
The amount of times I've heard you say, I don't like women, it's just too much. Thomas has never said that.
Thank you for the record.
As a clarification. But never, rarely, sometimes, always.
Cool. Was that 3-1?
It was.
Nice.
Wow.
We didn't even have to get to Thomas.
Yeah. The juggernaut we all expected.
I saved Thomas from making the decision.
Once again, this weirdly does feel like a group that would make that decision, where I think a different group would very easily make the other decision.
I mean, like, pull up on Twitter. See what the results are.
If we're talking about like what movie after this podcast wraps I want to go sit down and watch, like I'm not firing up Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always as opposed to John Wick 4.
Right.
But I'm not really voting that way either. So
that's valid.
Yeah. It's also like to your point too, Danny, like this is a group that like more people have seen Never, Rarely than like your regular poll. Like if you took this to Twitter, like most people have never even heard of that movie. And that's not a knock on its quality. It's just it's a smaller film that came out in a COVID year where like even the biggest films went unnoticed. So like this is the type of group that would look at a film like that and be like, yeah, of course you would nominate a masterpiece. Like, why wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And then you take it to Twitter and they're like, that's a movie. Like, you're just making up words. Like, of course John Wick should win.
You're just making up words. That's funny. I'm out of order on this bracket, so let's jump over to First Cow versus Everything Everywhere All at Once, just because I'm personally curious what you guys do with this. Todd, what's your vote here?
Oh man, this is my final. Like, if I seeded this bracket on my own, which would be completely biased, obviously,
Right.
these two would be in the finals. I don't have anything, and this is terrible podcasting. I don't have anything interesting to say that I haven't already said about both. I'm going to go Everything Everywhere, and it's there's not even a reason. If I were voting fourth, I might go First Cow. It's more of just like it's a coin flip for me. Like, literally, I could flip a coin.
Danny, what's your vote?
I knew I had a really strong feeling that the blind spot that would impact the bracket was me not having seen First Cow, because I do really respect immensely Kelly Reichardt as a filmmaker, and it's just a blind spot that I just haven't covered. I can't on ethic vote for something I haven't seen when I love the alternative option as much as I do. And I actually just hung an Everything Everywhere All at Once poster. I can't show you because it's like behind the screen, but I hung it like this weekend.
Nice.
So I have to go Everything Everywhere All at Once.
All right. Dakota, your vote.
I'm gonna continue being the contrarian for this matchup, so it is First Cow.
And Derek.
Yeah, I'll make this easy. It's just really hard to vote against Everything Everywhere. Even if it's going up against one of her better films for sure. Everything Everywhere has to. It's just got to move forward here.
It's tough, guys. Let's go over to Problemista versus RRR. Do not fail me here. Danny, what is your vote?
Oh no, he says do not fail me and then goes.
Do you want to be on this podcast again?
This is actually what I'm really struggling with. This I was looking at the Elite Eight board. I had a sense that this was gonna maybe come down to like an indie versus blockbuster type of conversation, because we have some mega blockbusters here and we have some really critical darling indie movies as well, and how that sort of plays out was maybe going to shape the direction. I love both movies very dearly. They were both in the top 10 of my respective best of the years. I am going to go with the film that surprised me more, and that's RRR.
Right. Dakota, what's your vote?
Yeah, haven't seen Problemista, so RR is getting my vote.
Derek, your vote?
I just want to say I absolutely love watching Todd and his reactions as other people. Like, he is genuinely taking this bracket thing so seriously. Like, he's watching actual games, and I love it with my whole heart. Like, I love it so much. It's so great.
I'm just crushing tape on everyone's voting pattern. Running the algorithms. I'm like, oh, we have a 66% chance that Danny's going to pick RRR here.
Can we get some live stat graphics going on here, Thomas?
Yeah. Right, yeah. I just have like a voting difference, like a really unnecessary stat in the corner that's like, so far the lead is 1-0 for RRR.
Yeah. Checking out Thomas's letterbox score, this is what we expect to be the winner.
All that being said, I do love Problemista. I think it is just Julio Torres. What he does is just so singular and so smart and so just different and unique. But I said when I was predicting the future that, like, whatever we do with John Wick Chapter 4 against Never Rarely, we're just gonna have to do it again in the next round, which means I'm gonna have to move RRR forward, and now we have to have basically the same discussion. So
same conversation, yeah. Blockbuster versus critical indie.
Yeah, and Todd, just for the record, what was your thoughts?
I'm voting for RRR, but I do want to just point out that it's kind of incredible that this, like, what would have been for basically every other Caligula film, like, completely overlooked in the West is like now positioned as David versus Goliath with like probably some like the Sundance SNL written like darling, and we're like, it's just the David to this massive blockbuster that like a massive blockbuster, sure, but it's not like RRR is your typical massive blockbuster. Like this is 100% the exception to the rule.
Yeah,
that's a fair point to make.
So, yeah.
All right, for the last position, Dune Part 2 versus The Batman. Dakota, what's your vote here?
This is really tough for me. Both are excellent blockbusters, and frankly, you can't go wrong with either pick. But I can't go against Dune Part 2.
Derek, your vote.
Yeah, same. And I'm not even that big of a Dune fan. I really just don't care for the lore of the world. But there are things in Dune Part 2 that legitimately blew me away. And I grew an appreciation for what Villeneuve is doing. And he's actually one of the few directors I've done a full complete filmography watch. So I'm gonna go. It hurts because I don't like voting against my favorite superhero apparently. But I'm gonna go Dune Part 2.
All right, Todd, your vote.
Only one of these movies has Florence Pugh. So
I'm going and that's a valid way to vote.
The logic is sound.
Underneath this Georgia Bulldog sweater is a shirt that just says Florence Pugh on it. And you won't know if I'm lying or not, but I'm going Dune 2.
And Danny, for the record, what's your thoughts here?
Yeah, for the record, I am a big Dune head. Read the books, love the lore, really a big fan of Villeneuve, been a big Dune fan. I love David Lynch's Dune. Like I love Dune. I love the material. I love what it does. So Dune Part 2.
All right. I don't know where this is going to go from here. This is where my foresight ends. And I'm so curious at how this conversation is going to go. So for our final four, we have Dune Part 2 versus Everything. It hurts to say. we have Dune Part 2 versus Everything Everywhere All at Once, and we have RRR versus Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
We can't just stop here and celebrate these four films.
I know, right? There's a part of me that just wants to do that.
This feels cruel at this point.
Let's talk about this final four. Todd, what are your feelings about how this all boiled down to these four films?
I think this is the correct final four. Like when it's all said and done, I think if we did like a simulation of this 1,000 times, it would come out differently a bunch of times. But I think the majority of the time, these would be the final four. I think it's correct. They're all for me and like minimum 4.5 star films, minimum, like on my most critical days. I think all of these movies are very good. Almost all of them are immensely rewatchable, right? Like I'm not sure that like Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is a rewatchable movie. But in terms of movies that have stuck with me, like these four, Catch in My Throat, Pump Through My Blood, like it's a miracle we got one of these films in March, let alone four of these films in March. So I'm really happy with these final four. We did well despite our contrarian.
What are you taking shots at me for?
I'm talking about Derrick.
Oh, okay.
Well, contrarian Dakota, what do you think?
It's very interesting because, like, looking at the bracket, I would say the left side, where we've got Dune and Everything Everywhere. If you were to ask me to predict what movies would be in the top four, those would be the two easiest choices that I would say we're probably going to end there. And then on the right side, I think we've got one that like, I was like, oh yeah, I could see how RRR could get there. I know it's got its fans. And then the big surprise for me is that Never, Rarely has made it this far. And I think it just has to do with how the matchups went down, where it definitely had the easiest route of the four. It didn't have a juggernaut like the other three films to go up against, which is going to make this next matchup very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Danny, what are your thoughts on this final four?
Yeah, definitely echo Dakota's sentiment. And just like first glance, there was a path that you could pretty easily piece together for how Dune Part 2 and Everything Everywhere All at Once could get there, despite the black bag, in my opinion, unfounded support. But
whoa.
I will not tolerate this slander, Danny. I was there for you in 1001.
Everything in my bones like is pained when I have to go against Derek, but like in this scenario, I have to go against Derek. The right side, I did feel like it had a little bit more chaos to it. Like, for example, John Wick Chapter 4 could have lost in the first round very easily, and I think if it had, After Yang might be the final four representation for that bracket, for that bottom right bracket. So I think that there was just a couple of votes here and there that swayed things in a direction that made things a lot more interesting on that bottom right corner. But as a whole, I again like echoing my sentiment earlier, I do think like this sort of like big, bold vision type of movie versus the the two smaller movies that we see on the bottom half here is a really interesting dynamic that unfolded with kind of blockbuster versus indie film.
And Derek, I think yeah, let's get your
Yeah,
thoughts.
I mean, I would echo everything that we've all said, and it's looking at this final four. Not only do I feel like it feels right, like a lot of these are they're tough decisions because these are all movies that I love, and like Todd said, like there's not a movie in this final four that's not that's not below 4 stars, if not 4.5. Like these are movies that I genuinely love, and in my opinion are objectively great, but. I find it so interesting that when we go through this whole exercise, you really start to see like how big and small the March movie is. And it kind of goes all the way back to what we were talking about, right? Where like the award season ends and then you get this little like respite, you get this little period of like discovery catch up, setting the precedent for the rest of the year. And I feel like this final four really kind of represents that in this weird way where it's like, yeah, you've got the juggernaut in Dune Part 2. You've got the small, tiny indie that really only critics love. You have this international sensation that people just gravitate towards. And then you have this really oddball South by Southwest, critically acclaimed juggernaut that came out of nowhere. Like it's like so representative of just the chaos you get in March and April. So yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting Final Four.
Yeah, I don't
Derek,
think
to that note, if we had looked at this Final Four as like outside of our critic realm, like if you were like a general movie watcher that doesn't like, isn't as invested, I would love for somebody to try to guess what month these four movies came out. Because I genuinely feel like, outside of my own knowledge of knowing when Dune Part 2 came out because of the whole delay and knowing that Everything Ever All at Once was a South by Southwest movie, I actually couldn't really pinpoint in my head where Never Really Sometimes Always exactly came out. And then RRR was this like weird, like when did it come from India to the US? So like I actually feel like it is genuinely hard to try to pinpoint what month this came out in. And that again speaks to the sort of like chaos of like what is March? It's this sort of weird in between.
Yeah. I look back on, I think the decision that I'm looking back on most was that John Wick Chapter 4 versus After Yang decision I had to make. You're welcome, Never Rarely Sometimes Always people, that I helped that go up against John Wick Chapter 4, because I don't know what I would have done if it was Never Really Sometimes Always against After Yang.
That's brutal. That's really tough.
Yeah, so you're welcome.
That's not that hard for me. I don't know why. I'm a huge Kogonada person. That just wouldn't have been that hard for me. Like I think Never Rarely Sometimes Always is best of the decade type stuff, and I think After Yang is very good, but there's one of them is like a cut above for me personally.
Interesting. All right, well let's get into it. We're coming down to it. Let's go Dune Part 2 versus Everything Everywhere All at Once. Todd, what's your vote?
Do it. Come on.
You're saying do it.
Palpatine.
Wait, so
do it.
I just to get this straight, we're saying do it. Vote for the big studio blockbuster franchise film that was made with like 9 digits of money versus the small indie film that happened to juggernaut its way into everyone's hearts.
Yes.
Well, I guess I'll be a sellout and vote for I'm gonna go Everything Everywhere, and Dune Part 2 is phenomenal, and yeah, like I don't know. I'm going Everything Everywhere. I think it's it's more important to me personally. And at this point, all of these movies are excellent. So I'm just going to go with kind of what matters to me more, and it's Everything Everywhere.
All right, Derek, what's your vote?
Yeah, I'm gonna go Everything Everywhere. I I got screwed this Oscar season because I picked with logic over picking with my heart, and it like just ruined way too many categories, and I ended up only going like 17 out of 23 instead of like 20 out of 23 because I don't care about the shorts because you can never guess those right. But I botched some pretty big categories because I was doing the math and messing with statistics and doing all that kind of stuff. And it just absolutely ruined me. So I'm not going to let that happen here. I'm going to pick with my heart and I'm going to go Everything Everywhere.
All right. Danny, your vote?
Yeah, this is tough. I love both movies very dearly. Both of them are just about near perfect in my book. They have just the minorest of nitpicky flaws in each. The reason I'm gonna put forward Everything Everywhere All at Once is because I'm thinking about the game and I just don't resonate with Dune Part 2 as a March release in the way I resonate with Everything Everywhere All at Once as a March release. And I do think that just factors a little bit into my vote because I just think that Everything Everywhere All at Once, when I think about March release of of what that means in the 2020s, it's that movie for me. And so I have to, I think, on pure, almost identical quality of movie in my book, I have to go with that as the slight edge.
All right. Dakota, for the record, what's your thoughts here?
So ignore the fact that for the next matchup, completely ignore what I'm about to say here. But the bigger the budget, the better the movie is obviously how things work.
What in the?
Oh,
do not
talking
use
about
my own
Electric
words
State.
against me.
You must be talking.
Yeah, don't use my own words against me for the next matchup. But for here, more equals better. And I gotta go with my Canadian brethren, Denis. So Doom Part 2 is my vote because I gotta be the everything hater.
I appreciate the loyalty to your Canadian counterparts, but
Yeah.
that's fair. I'm glad I didn't have to vote on that one because I might have like had an aneurysm or something. That
You're all a bunch of cowards.
We all were having one, trust me.
Yes, I'm sure. All right. Well, here's round two of aneurysm having. RRR versus Rarely, Never, Sometimes, Always. Dakota, we're gonna start with you.
So, as I was saying last round, the smaller the budget, the more you can do with a film. And obviously, we need to support these smaller independent films that have a deep resident message. And because I've never said anything contradictory to that ever in my life, and I also believe abortion is healthcare, never, rarely, sometimes, always.
All right. Danny, your vote here.
It's hard to follow that one up because where do you go from there? How do you follow abortion as healthcare up with even the potential to vote for RRR?
Yeah, Dakota's like, if you vote for RRR, you're obviously pro-life.
You're obviously pro-life.
Clearly hate women.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just what it sounds like you all are saying. So maybe
that was a really tough position to be put in, especially as someone who has very aggressively pushed for never really sometimes always throughout this bracket. Again, like really almost impossible to decipher for me just on quality of film, especially because they are so vastly different. This is a position where I am also, I think, going to promote the smaller film and genuinely believe that everybody needs to watch this movie. So never, rarely, sometimes, always.
Yes.
Wow.
All right. Derek, what's your vote here?
Man, I need the record to show that I love women. I support full body autonomy.
Yeah. So speak with your vote.
Show it with your vote. Yeah,
Yeah.
Show it with your vote.
Don't just talk the talk, walk the walk.
Some of us showed up on election day.
Oh, now I feel like if I vote for RRR, I'm just one of those like turncoat Democrats that are like, we can't vote for this bill. Actually, I'm going to vote for this bill. Oh God.
Do what you need to do.
Yeah. Again, this is about the films.
I know. It's like it's hard because there's such a joy and so much fun that goes into something like RRR, where it is the film that you can pack a theater out with, and everybody's gonna dance and everybody's gonna have a good time, and it's big and it's loud and it's wild and it's just such a great event. But there is also something to be said for a film that, like we stated before, is is dangerously more relevant now than it was when it was made. And like those things, I do feel like those things need to be seen and they need to be highlighted. I want to abstain from this so bad.
Not allowing it. The moderator
I know.
does not allow it.
I can't even believe I'm going to say this out loud. I'm actually going to go Never Rarely.
Oh, wow.
I can tell you right now, when I saw this, I was like, hell yeah, dude. Everything versus RRR, let's fucking go. Like, that is, like, I had decided that in my mind, and I think we need to stand by our truth, and if we're gonna carry this movie this far, we might as well just carry it all the way to the end and see what happens. So
there we
go. Todd, for the record, what's your thoughts here?
I mean, my vote doesn't matter here. Like classic American voting. Like, I don't know. I guess I'll sell out to the big Asian corporations. I'll go RRR. Like, okay. I don't know. 2 movies that are really about the power of friendship more than any movies that are left remaining. And RRR is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't actually have to do the deciding vote here, because if Derek had picked RRR, I would have been the deciding vote, because I think we all know Thomas would have tiebroken for RRR. So
yeah.
Thanks for saving me, Derek.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
For the record, I will go RRR though, just so it's not like a clean sweep.
There you go.
And honestly, in between, I don't think there's a wrong pick to like between those two. In my opinion, like you really like there is no wrong pick, because we could run this again, and I would probably pick RRR. Like it's just
if Derek had pulled first on that and he went RRR, I see a world where it went RRR. Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
Like once we got to those final 4, it's almost indecipherable on quality of film at that point.
Yeah.
Well, we have one more decision to make, guys. It has come down, for everyone listening, it has come down to Everything Everywhere All at Once versus Rarely, Never, Sometimes, Always.
You just purposely screwing up the title?
It's like a lot of words for me.
It's a lot of words. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. I got halfway through and I was like, did I say that right? I don't think so. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always versus Everything Everywhere All at Once.
It's the whiskey at 10 a.m. is what it is.
That's we're gonna blame everything I do wrong on that. That's fine. Dakota, I just want to get everyone's thoughts before we submit our final votes. Dakota, how do you feel about this final matchup?
I mean, this is a pretty crazy one. Like I said last time, EAO, I think, was the number 1 seeded film, I'm guessing, in the entire thing. So there's literally no surprise that it's here. As much as I've been joking about, I do really like that movie. So I am happy that's there. And then I'm just blown away that Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always made this far. Because I thought the big tough matchup was going to be Never, Rarely versus After Yang in that side of things. And I could have seen it going the complete opposite way, where I could see After Yang being the other finalist, potentially.
Right. Todd, how do you feel about this final matchup?
I mean, I know Dakota's like not cultured, so he's surprised that John Wick, a trained assassin, killed his chances at an After Yang Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always matchup. But I'm really happy with this finals. I think you have... I think it's funny because, like, obviously this is about March releases, but I keep going back to, like, it almost, when we got to the final 4, if you had told me, if like you'd taken the name off the bracket and my participation off of it and just presented those four and said, what was the bracket about? I wouldn't have been surprised if it was a like best of the decade bracket. So for it to be these final two, I think you have on one side, maybe the movie that's defined the 2020s more than any movie. And then on the other, maybe the most important movie of the 2020s. So in that regard, I'm really proud of us and of these coming to the end. And yeah, it's tough. It's a tough decision.
It's going
and
to be for sure.
Two good movies.
Yeah. Danny, your thoughts on these?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a wonderful representation of what March can do, what March can be, and I think that there's almost like a secondary poll as I'm looking at this, and also just kind of in the way it's visually organized, where it's like Dune Part 2 versus RRR and Everything Everywhere All at Once versus Never Really. So like if they had just been rearranged and those two polls had played out, it would be almost a different way of thinking about it. But like I said throughout, I think this is a really cool way to understand what March can be, with a film that propelled its way from a March release into the hearts of so many people, all the way to a Best Picture win, versus a film that far less people have seen, but those who have seen it have been greatly impacted by it over the course of the last 4 years and continue to resonate with it as it becomes more and more prescient and important. So I second the feeling from Todd about just being proud that this is the outcome. But I think there were pretty much no wrong answers once we got to that final four.
Derrick, last one. Let's get your final.
Yeah, I mean, just honestly, just echoing the sentiment of everyone, and I also think that it is a really great representation of this show, because this idea of like all my friends are movie fans, like it is clear that you have brought on genuine movie fans that watch movies, right? Like we don't just watch a couple, we don't just watch superhero movies, we clearly watch more than 12 films a year, like, and that's not even like it's not even like a critic thing, right? Like it's very apparent that we love movies. Like we genuinely love film and we love cinema and we engage the cinema on a regular basis. And I think even just in this final four, even when you get into the final eight, it's very clear that like we're not, like you said, if you were to just remove March from it and then ask like, hey, what was this bracket? It's like, oh, well, it's clearly the best films of the 2020s. Like it's so, but I just love that it's such a testament to what you're trying to do on the show. Because yeah, this feels like all your friends are actually movie fans, and like they brought in like this incredibly culturally relevant superstar from its year, and then you bring in this very criminally underrated but vitally necessary watch and make them go head to head in the final. Like that's just that. I think that's cool. I think it's really cool that it ended this way.
I am so happy you think it's cool. Now you have to vote. Derrick.
Oh no! I wasn't gonna do that. No.
Actually, this is where it becomes really uncool in my book, and I think I'm actually good. I had a hard stop at 2:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah. I gotta go feed the dog.
No.
Yeah,
The monitor says.
Yeah. I was saying all that because I thought you were wrapping up.
We were wrapping up.
Just the end of the show.
It was a very nice conclusive statement, but we have one more round to do, guys. Derrick.
Great. You can find my work over at Contra Zoom Podcast. Thank you so much, Thomas.
What are you making me go first for?
Because you just gave a beautiful speech. I just want you to follow it up with your vote.
God. Jesus. I'm gonna go, and this.
Good luck, buddy. Good luck.
There's no right or wrong answer here. So
the analytics depend on your answer.
Todd's stats are coming out now.
Todd's running the math on how many of the first choices ended up winning the poll.
Yeah, right.
The lead in the first quarter.
So this is something. So when I do any kind of ranking. And not necessarily like when I select best of or things like that, but whenever I'm like, and I hate to do this, but just to kind of contextualize my decision here, when I rank things in the MCU, whatever part, phase, whatever that is, I typically will lean more towards rewatchability of whatever that MCU movie is, because I tend to think that those are more synonymous with quality. Now, that doesn't necessarily apply here, but I'm going to apply it here, and go with rewatchability. And I think of these two, the movie that I want to go watch now is Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I don't want to take away anything from Never Rarely, because it is a film that you should see. But if we're talking about like what's going to happen when I want to get a glass of whiskey and just sit and watch a movie, it's going to be Everything Everywhere, and that's going to be my final answer.
All right, Todd. Everything Everywhere All at Once, or Never Really Sometimes Always?
So my plan to have the two longest titles in the bracket.
It worked.
What the fuck
Almost
happened to Do Not
worked.
Expect Too Much from the End of the World?
Yeah, I was pushing hard for it. I was just on the wrong side of the numbers there. I knew we were gonna have to foul on the play and go with Never Rarely. I'm gonna go Everything Everywhere. I think Never Rarely Sometimes Always is a beautiful movie and is a super important movie, and I've said all of that like 4 times now. I think Everything Everywhere is like number 2 on the decade for me in terms of just like my favorites. Maybe not the most well made, but in terms of my favorites, how it hit me, what it means to me, what it means to movie going, and yeah, and it being a March release and it really carrying that steam. So I'm gonna go Everything Everywhere.
Dakota. Everything Everywhere All at Once, or Never Rarely Sometimes Always?
I'll tell you this: if RRR had moved through, I would have voted for Everything Everywhere.
Interesting.
But it did not. Never Rarely has been my passion pick this tournament, and I do have to go there. There's a couple just absolutely heart crushing scenes in this film. The title of this movie comes from, if you have not seen it, a nurse is asking this young girl a questionnaire about her health and her sexual history, and those are the options that you can give: never, rarely, sometimes, or always in terms of the answers. And the further this interview goes on, just the more devastating it gets. And then there's just a few other moments throughout the film on the subway platform where she reaches out to hold her friend's hand as she's doing something that she does not want to do happens. Just a whole bunch of great stuff, and along with this whole mystery of whether or not her father or stepfather is also abusive to her. It's got so many layers to this film. I'm not going to be upset with how this tournament ends. I think it's going to be a very worthy winner, because I'm sure I know what Danny is going to pick here. But I do want to be the lone dissenter, I guess.
Danny, are we wrapping this up? Are we between Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Or are we going to overtime?
Yeah, but make Thomas have skin in the game, just for the sake of making him do it.
Something I want to point out about this final matchup that I am only now realizing because of some of Dakota's reminiscence on what this movie does is we have 2 films, one that lives and thrives on maximalism of style and storytelling and costume and production design, and we have one that lives on minimalism and is deafening when it is basically silent, and we are just watching characters grapple with the emotions that they are forced to deal with because of the constraints of the society in which they live in. And I think that's a really beautiful juxtaposition between these 2 films that couldn't be more opposite in how they are delivering their themes and messages. I'm going to overtime here because and that's that's not only because one, I love a competitive spirit and I love making Thomas make decisions, but also because Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is my true vote. If I was first, if I was in Derek's position, I would have also voted for Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. When I think back on these 2 films, I love them very much, but Never Rarely Sometimes Always did more for me personally, and it's a movie that I continue to resonate with a bit more than Everything Everywhere All at Once. And that is with a pretty wide gap on how recently I've even seen them. I've seen Everything Everywhere All at Once much more recently, but the way that I reflect on and recommend and think about Never Rarely Sometimes Always is just something that is too potent for me to not at least push to a final vote here. So that is my vote. I think I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is an absolutely worthy winner in every sense of the word, and I've certainly not contradicting myself on saying it's the March it's the film that should represent March. But Never Rarely Sometimes Always is, we put it this far, and I'm gonna try to see it through to the finish line.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
Black Bag Alliance is over. Danny, you're now my new best friend.
For those of you who didn't hear me pouring my next glass of whiskey while I have to make this decision, this is so tough. Everything Everywhere All at Once is so good. It's so good. I love that movie so much. Obviously, everything you guys have said is valid. And I think Everything Everywhere is one of those movies that, like, when I first saw it, everything about it just really, really resonated with me. I love this movie. Oh.
Don't feel bad. Don't let Dakota make you feel bad. Everything Everywhere is also about women.
That is, you know what? Good point. It is a women empowering film. So don't let anybody tell you that voting for one or the other is somehow against women. That right. Is false news.
Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always has all the power that you guys have explained, and is so good for that as well. I've only seen it the one time I saw it during the pandemic. But it's like you guys have already kind of expressed, it's not necessarily like, this isn't the case where rewatchability really kind of dominates here. They both are such great films in their own way, and it is such a crime that you guys make me choose between the two.
Had to be.
You made us choose.
I
did. He made us choose every single time from 32
like,
to 1.
Danny, how dare you invite me on your podcast to put this bracket together and make me choose?
Look, here's what I'm going to judge this by, like, maybe the pettiest metric, because they're both really great films, and while my heart once won, that one did win Oscars already. So
I can't believe we're doing this.
I am going to put forth Rarely, Never, Sometimes, Always.
No,
that's not the movie. That's Never Rarely.
Never Rarely. I didn't even get the title wrong. God dang it! Never Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
We did it, Danny. We did it.
Oh my god!
We were at a 2-0 deficit.
I thought it was going to be a sweep. Oh my god!
I did too. I was not expecting to have to make that decision, guys. I was not expecting it, but I think everything you guys have said is correct. They're both really great films. They both are important in their own ways. I just want more people to know what Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is. So I'm going to put that as the winner.
And I actually, I think this is a totally valid way to think about it, because Everything Everywhere All at Once, if that won the bracket, everyone would say, yeah, obviously, like that makes complete sense. Like, of course it would win that bracket. But I think to open the conversation to something else that obviously resonated with all of us in a very major way, and to have that be the outcome, I think is a really valid conversation to have.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about this choice, this really impossible choice y'all made me make?
I really did not see this. I'm going to be honest. I really thought that when we put it to you, I was like, that's it. Never, Rarely. We took it as far as it could go. It probably went farther than it should have. And then you, dude, but again, like, there is no wrong choice here. Like, right. They're like, okay. Yeah, this is Yeah, dude, if you redid this bracket, like just put everything back in the exact same order as it was before, there is no way I would have pegged this movie to be the winner.
That is
Like,
that is valid. Yeah. I think
that's
no,
crazy.
because I didn't. I mean, I put the bracket together, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool that that's there." But
I think it's also cool because we sat down and had a conversation and discussed why that movie resonated with us, and that I think we all kind of fed into that, because I think if we had all filled out this bracket in isolation, submitted it to you ahead of time, would we have come to that conclusion? Maybe not, because
Probably
everything
not.
everywhere at once is more of a default answer. But because we have this friendly discourse and conversation about it, I think that is part of what lended itself to a different outcome.
No, this is great. This is why conversation is so important, especially in like film. And yeah, I think you guys did a really great job narrowing this bracket down. So I'm happy that Never Really, Sometimes Always is the winner of the All My Friends and Movie Fans Best March Release bracket. Yeah, and congratulations on also being on the longest episode of All My Friends and Movie Fans, guys. Thank you for sticking with me.
Yeah.
Let's just go into plugs. Let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Danny, where can everyone find you and your content?
Certainly. Well, you can follow me at The Rolling Tape. That's my outlet that I host our many times a week podcast. You can also find me personally at DTJ Cinema on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
Awesome. Derrick, where can people find you and your content?
Yeah, you can find all of my written works at nerdbot.com. And then you can find me on pretty much all socials at DRock Comedy, or you can just search my name, Derrick Murray. My profile is public on Facebook. Yeah, check me out. And then same thing on Letterboxd. So,
yeah, Dakota, where can everyone find you and your podcast?
Sure. Yeah, it's called Contra Zoom Pod. The website's contrazoompod.com, at Contra Zoom Pod on all the socials as well. I do a podcast and have a bunch of reviews. I've hired more writers recently, so we're pumping out even more quality written reviews too.
Awesome. Dakota, and sorry, you're Dakota. Todd,
I am.
Anything you want to plug?
I am the Dakota now. You can follow me at Todd_complex, and on most places. Most of my work is at ForReel, and I'm around, so look for me.
Guys, thank you so much for being a part of this episode of All My Friends Are Movie Fans. If you're listening and you like movies, we should be friends as well. Follow us at all the socials that are in the description, and make sure to connect and keep in touch. And we will see you on the next episode of All My Friends Are Movie Fans.